Welcome to Redemption. It's good to see you all again this morning. 3 weeks in a row. It's been great to be with you the last handful of weeks. Hey, by the way, if you're joining us for the very first time, if you're new to Redemption, I wanted to start by welcoming you. We're so glad that you're here. Let me introduce myself real quick, because I realized I don't think I even did that last week. I am not our lead pastor. We look nothing alike. His name is Corey Ball. He and his wife, Allison, had their first baby a couple of weeks ago, and so he will be back with you next weekend, but he just had a couple of weeks here where he just got to be home with them, three of them just beginning this family of theirs together. And so we're really looking forward to having Corey back next week, but my name is Casey Jordan. I was part of the launch team here at Redemption, so back 6 years ago, I guess at this point almost, was part of the team that helped start Redemption. And so that's who I am, and that's why I'm here today. But here at Redemption, we hope that you experience two things this morning. First of all, we hope that you experience the presence of God. Now, the great news is that God is present regardless. Our hope is that you would experience his presence, that you would encounter him here today. But then second of all, we hope that you would encounter just the nicest people in St. Louis. And I know I've said this like every time, I've spoken, but truly, I've been around so many different churches, and this is the nicest group of people. It's such a nice group. So I hope that's been your experience this morning. I'm sure I'm not the first person to welcome you, but if I am, welcome. Talk to someone after the service. I think you will meet some of the nicest people in St. Louis here. So, as you guys probably know at this point, I've got 4 nieces, and I've got 3 nephews, and I've got a whole bunch of other little buddies. And so I've spent a lot of time watching kids. Even though I don't have any kids of my own, I've spent a lot of time babysitting. I've done a lot of bedtimes. And my oldest niece, Annie, so typically the way bedtime goes within our family is, you read a book, you talk for a little bit, put them down. So Annie recently, my oldest niece, she's 8 years old, the last handful of times that I've put her to bed, she hasn't wanted me to read her a story. She's wanted me to tell her stories from my childhood. Like she wants to know what it was like when I was a kid. And so I've been telling her all these different stories. So I've told her about this magical world that my brothers and I invented when we were kids, playing out in the woods behind our house. Think like Bridge to Terabithia, but with like a less tragic ending, okay? Like that's what we did as kids. We had this whole like magical world back there. So I told her about that. I've told her about the time that I missed my youngest brother's birthday like 3 years in a row when we were teenagers. I'm the oldest. My youngest brother, Matt, some of you guys know him. I missed his birthday like 3 years in a row for just various reasons. And so one year I finally told him, I was like, buddy, whatever you want to do today. I was probably like 16, 17 years old. He was like 11. I was like, whatever you want to do today, we will spend your birthday however you want. He's like, okay, I want to play a family game of football. Great. So we go to the backyard, me, my 2 brothers, my parents, we're playing football. I kid you not, we get like 10 minutes into the game. I jump up for an interception. I come down and shatter my ankle and spend the rest of the evening in the ER. Ruined another birthday of his. And he has not let me forget it. He has not let me forget it. I've told her about how my dad, her papa, invented a sport called bike soccer, which is exactly what it sounds like. And it is the most fun sport ever invented if you don't care about your shins. It is an absolute blast, but it would tear you up. It would just tear you up. So I've been telling Annie all of these stories. And I think the thing is that we're compelled by stories, aren't we? We love stories. We love to hear stories. We love to tell stories. We love stories. The interesting thing about stories and the stories that we tell is that you can really start to get to know someone's heart by the stories that they tell. You can really come to know and understand what it is that matters to them, what they prioritize in their lives. So we've been in a series the last handful of weeks that we really didn't title. I referred to it last week as the most important series, because we've talked about the most important question that you will ever answer. Who do you say that Jesus is? The most important gift you will ever give or receive, and that's forgiveness. We talked about that last week. Well, today we're going to talk about the most important story that you'll ever tell. That said, before I dive in, I need to tell you, I said that last week, that this is the most important series. And as I was driving home, I had 2 thoughts in my head. First of all, how unbelievably arrogant. This is the most important series. And second of all, I wish Corey was here for me to tease him, but come back next week, it'll be less important than what I've been saying for the last 3 weeks. That was my thought process driving home. So I just feel like I need to explain where that kind of title came from. These couple of things: most important question, most important gift, and today, most important story. So here at Redemption, we start in the same place in our Bibles every single week, and that's the table of contents. So if you have your Bible with you, or if you have it on your phone, feel free to pull up the table of contents. We're going to be in the book of Mark, chapter 5. Okay, that's where we're going to really be camping out today. So let me just read you the first sentence while you're getting there. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. Okay, so the last couple of weeks, throughout the messages, I've been trying to ask us good questions to ask of the text. Here's some things to think about. Here's some things to look for. And so we talked about, for example, 2 weeks ago, why do I need to know that detail? Why do I need to know that this story took place in Caesarea Philippi? Right? We talked about, why do I need to know that detail? We've also talked last week about, where have I seen that before? Where else does that concept or that phrase or that story show up in the Bible? And what can that other passage teach me or tell me about this one? Right? So here's the question I want to ask about this passage. Okay, they arrived to the other side of the lake, to the region of the Gerasenes. Where are they coming from? Where are they coming from? Here's the thing. When we read our Bibles, we have all these chapters and verses, right? And I'm so grateful that we do. It makes navigating the Bible so much easier. Because I can tell you, hey, go to the book of Mark. We're going to be in chapter 5. Rather than me having to say to you, hey, go find the part where they get to the Gerasenes. Right? That would be so much harder for you to get to quickly. Now, I'm talking like not age of smartphones where you can just Google, where's Gerasenes show up in the book of Mark? So chapters and verses help us to navigate the Bible. But what you need to understand is that they're not original to the text. They were added later to help us navigate it, which is great. But I think one of the downsides to having chapters and verses in Scripture is that we tend to read chapter by chapter. And so we'll just like kind of hop in midway through a story, whereas originally it was written as just one continuous story. And so the original readers, the original audience of the text, they would have known what comes before this story. And so let me just go back a little bit into Mark chapter 4. You don't have to flip there, but let me just go back a little bit. It says, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side. Okay, you guys ready for some geography again? Yeah? Okay, so let me show you a map. This is Capernaum. Capernaum is the place, this is the Sea of Galilee, so that little blue circle in the middle, that's the Sea of Galilee. Capernaum is really where Jesus made his home base. All right, that was his primary kind of outpost for doing ministry. It's on the northern side of the sea, as we see. It's a really fascinating place. Really, Capernaum was the epicenter of Jewish scholarship in that day. Brilliant Jewish minds, people who knew their texts well. They knew their Old Testaments well. So this is where Jesus goes. If you're the Messiah, if you're the Savior who's fulfilling all of these Old Testament prophecies, where do you go? To the place where people are going to know those prophecies, right? So Jesus chooses Capernaum very intentionally. Like, that is not by accident. He goes and sets up his headquarters here. By the way, Capernaum was known as one of the 3 towns in what's called the Righteous Triangle. Here's what it looks like. So Capernaum, Chorazin, and Bethsaida, it's known as the Righteous Triangle because in these 3 towns, again, kind of a little triangle, they were filled with righteous Jews. And when I say righteous Jews, what I mean is devout Jews, people who did know their Bibles, people who were looking for and longing for and waiting for this promised Messiah. And so this is where Jesus sets up his headquarters, is right here in the Righteous Triangle. That's important for us to understand. By the way, just real quick aside, most of Jesus' disciples come from one of these 3 towns. Most of the men that he called, at least 6 of them, we know that Philip and, let's see, who all do we have here? Peter and Andrew were from there. John was from there. Matthew was a tax collector in Capernaum. So a whole bunch of Jesus' disciples were from these 3 towns, or at least spent significant amounts of time in these 3 towns. So the point is that these were faithful Jewish communities. They were faithful Jewish communities. But let me tour you around Galilee a little bit more. So over to the western side here, you have Tiberias. Okay? Tiberias was the capital city of a regional king named Herod Antipas. And in Tiberias, you found a group of people known as the Herodians. They were Jews. They were Jewish people. But they were Jews who were very devoted to and committed to the Herod dynasty. They loved King Herod. They loved King Herod. Why? Because King Herod was in good standing with the Roman emperor. And so if they were in line with Herod, well, then they were in good standing with the emperor too. So it was economically and politically advantageous to be in good standing with Herod, to be a fan of Herod. And so that's really what you find in Tiberias. They're Jewish people, but they're politically and economically aligned with really kind of this essentially Roman puppet that that the emperor had put in place, not that God had put in place, that the emperor had put in place to rule over the region. All right, so that's what you find in Tiberias. All right, let me take you one more place here. I promise we're going to get to the story. But I think this matters. So the last place is Gamla. So Gamla is up a little bit to the north, but still in the region of Galilee. And Gamla was the hometown of the Zealots. Okay? The Zealots were a group of very devout Jews, but they wanted to overthrow the Roman Empire by force. That's who they were. They were a very militant, oftentimes violent group of Jewish people who wanted to overthrow Rome by force. In fact, there was a subsect of zealots called the Sicarii, and they got that name from these little Sicarii knives that they would carry around. And when they were in a crowded space, they would just come up to a Roman, stab him, and then fade into the background. And no one would know that they were even there. All right, so there was a subsect. Now, interesting, real quick aside, but interesting, Jesus has at least one disciple by the name of Simon the Zealot. Yes. Also, there's some scholars who think that Judas Iscariot indicates to us that he was part of the Sicarii sect. Iscariot, all right? Jesus also puts them into a group with a guy named Matthew, who's a Roman tax collector. He's Jewish, but he's collecting taxes for Rome. And you know what Jesus says to them? Love one another, right? Matthew the tax collector, who would have been seen as a traitor by the Jewish people, and then these at least one, maybe two zealots. How will the world know that you belong to me? By the way that you love one another. That's just an interesting aside. Has nothing to do with my story. So why do I tell you all this? Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that Jesus did not choose his place of ministry haphazardly. This was no accident. Do you see the diversity here? They're all Jewish people, but they are coming from very different ideologies, very different commitments in terms of their priorities. You've got the righteous Jews in the triangle. You've got the Herodians, who again are Jewish, but really more secular. You've got the zealots up in Gamla, who want to overthrow Rome by force. There's diversity in Galilee. So when Jesus comes to launch his public ministry, he goes to Galilee. He goes to Galilee. Now here's what I want you to understand. Jesus' disciples would have felt complete freedom to travel all around this region. Even though they don't all believe the same things, they would have had no problem going to Tiberias. They would have had no problem going up to Gamla. These are all Jewish people, right? There's diversity for sure, but they're all welcome in these places. But then Jesus says, let's go to the other side. And so the other side actually had a really important connotation to the Jewish people. The other side was pagan territory, Susita. Susita is on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee, and it's in a region that is known as the Decapolis. The Decapolis, Deca 10, polis city. It's the 10 Greco-Roman cities, and they were pagan to their core. Pagan to their core. These are not righteous Jews. These aren't even secular Jews. These aren't definitely not zealous Jews. It's pagan. So I promise you, when Jesus says, let's go to the other side, the disciples are like, come again? You want to go where? You want to go to the other side? We've never been there before. We don't go to the other side. And so what we need to understand about Susita, that's the Hebrew name for it, Hippos is the Greek name, is that it was said to have just sparkled. This is like Greco-Roman city at its finest. It sat on top of a hill, and it was just said that from all around. By the way, the Sea of Galilee is not that big. To call it a sea is generous. Really? It's a large pond or a small lake. Really, it's so. The first time I saw it in person, I was like, oh, you can see the whole thing. There's one hill in particular, if you stand on it, on the western side, you can literally see every edge of the sea. Like, that's how not that big it is. So the point is, they have seen the other side. They've just never been to the other side. But they knew what was there. Because Susita, this city on top of this hill, they could see it from every corner of the sea. So they knew it was there. They had just never been there. So Jesus finishes, he's been teaching all day. finishes teaching and says, okay, let's go to the other side. By the way, remember the story of the prodigal son? It says that he went to a far-off country. To them, this is a far-off country. It's possible that in that parable, when it says that he went to a far-off country, his dad could see where he was. But in terms of worldview, in terms of culture, in terms of commitments and priorities, it's a world away. Might as well be a far-off country. That's the mindset of the Decapolis, of Susita in particular. And so, anyways, Jesus' disciples had to be looking at him and just thinking, are you nuts? Why are we going there? Don't you know what's over there? Don't you know who is over there? We're going to the other side. But they get in the boat and they make their way to the other side. Now, along the way, a storm begins to rage and Jesus calms it. You might remember that story too. That's a story for another time. But here's what it says. Let's pick up the story in Mark 5. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put in chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, bowed low before him. With a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus said, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them into some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirit begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. All right, there's a little bit more, and we'll come back to it, but let me stop here for a second. So I mentioned that I was, a couple of weeks ago, that I was in Israel recently. I was there about 3 weeks ago. And the hotel that we were staying at was right in front of Susita. We were right on the eastern bank of the sea. And so I saw the cliff where this happened, because there's only one cliff face on that side where this could have taken place. And I love being at Susita. I love going to Susita. And I really love it when my friend Rich teaches this story, because Rich refers to this demon-possessed man as Crazy Larry. That's like his nickname for the guy. Or Crazy Naked Guy. Friends, fans? You know the reference? Yeah, okay. So I love that. I told Rich a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I'm speaking on this story in a few weeks. I'm definitely using Crazy Larry. That is going to be his name in my story. But here's a few things that I want you to notice here. First, it says that when they got to the other side, Jesus got out of the boat. Do you notice who it doesn't say got out of the boat? All of the disciples. All of the disciples. Jesus gets out of the boat. Did I mention this is pagan territory? Did I mention this is a place that they have never been before and never wanted to go before? When I was in high school, my parents gave me permission to drive me and a couple of friends downtown. So I grew up in Eureka, and my parents gave us permission to go downtown to see a concert at Mississippi Nights. Do you guys remember that venue? Yes. Oh, such a good venue. I'm so bummed that's closed. So I was probably 17 years old. My parents say, yeah, you can drive downtown. I don't know why they let us do that. They did, though. And the thing is, I had never driven downtown before. I'd been driving for a year and a half, something like that. But I had never driven downtown, much less by myself, with a bunch of other, 16, 17-year-olds. So we're driving downtown. I missed the last exit in Missouri. You know where you go if you miss the last exit in Missouri, right? So 17-year-old Casey drives across the bridge into East St. Louis, and the first place we saw to turn around was a strip club. Okay, guys, these are my youth group friends that I'm with. You need to understand this. This is a group of 3, 4, 17-year-old, good Christian youth group girls, and we get to the other side, if you will, and the first place to turn around is a strip club. I cannot tell you the anxiety that I was feeling just being in the parking lot of a strip club as a good 17-year-old youth group girl, right? I was terrified. Now, the anxiety that I was feeling pales in comparison to the anxiety that the disciples must have been feeling. We're not supposed to be here. This is the other side. I can't hammer this enough how terrified they were. And so it says that Jesus got out of the boat. It seems as though none of the disciples did. Like, we're going to wait in the car. And when I think about, me crossing and going, the river and going into this strip club parking lot, I think that if Jesus had been with me and he was like, hey, I'm going to go in and talk to some people, I've been like, I'll wait here. Yep, I'm gonna stay right here in this car. You go for it. I'm staying here. That's what's happening in this story. The disciples were like, you go for it. We're gonna stay in the boat. We're gonna stay in the boat. It probably didn't help that they were met by a demon-possessed man, right? That probably didn't really encourage them to get out of the boat. Like, yeah, let's go see about this. No, they're like, nope, we're good. We're good right here. You go do your thing. So Jesus gets out of the boat and he immediately encounters Crazy Larry, right? He's been completely overtaken by the demonic. He's breaking out of these chains that had been meant to restrain him. He goes about really like an animal, just like howling and growling. He's prowling around tombs. Like this is really a terrifying situation. But what we see is that as soon as he sees Jesus, he runs up to him. He runs right up to him. Now get this. This is not the demon-possessed man who is bowing before Jesus. These are the demons bowing before Jesus. They know exactly who he is. They know exactly who he is. So I mentioned earlier that right before, well, actually, let me read this again, and then we'll come back. So it says here, with a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." So remember I told you that right before this, they're crossing over the lake, the sea, to the other side, and a storm comes up. I told you that was a story for another time? Well, now is that time. Okay? So let me go back to that story for a second, because this is really interesting. It says in Mark 4, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the other side." So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up, shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we are going to drown?" When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." Suddenly the wind stopped, and there was a great storm. Then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" The disciples were absolutely terrified. Here's the interesting line. "Who is this man?" they asked each other. "Even the wind and waves obey him." So did you catch that? The disciples have been following Jesus for some period of time. We don't know how long at this point, but they've been following him for a bit. They see Jesus calm a storm, speak to the wind, speak to the waves, and they say, "Who is this guy?" They get to the other side. They're met by Crazy Larry and his legion of demons, and the demons say, "Son of the Most High God." They know who he is. The disciples don't yet, but the demons know exactly who he is. So let me just pause on that for a second. See, I think often we believe that believing Jesus is God is enough. That's what we think. Well, I believe that Jesus is God. That's all there is to it, right? But guys, the demons believe Jesus is God. And they're not saved. They're not in relationship with him. They haven't received or experienced his forgiveness. And so it's not enough to simply believe that Jesus is God. Now, it's an important first step, right? We talked about that week 1. Most important question you'll ever answer. Who do you say that Jesus is? Okay, that's an important first step, but it's not enough. Because even the demons believe that. It's not enough. The difference is whether or not you will trust Jesus. Whether or not you will submit your life to him. Whether or not you will have him not only as Savior, but as leader. Because it really has to be both. It really has to be both. if you really trust him to save you, well, then you also need to trust him to lead you. If you trust him enough to die for you, well, you need to trust him to know what's best, to want what's best, to tell you what's best, to show you what's best. That's the difference between those who are Christians, who've received his forgiveness, who've been brought into a reconciled relationship with God, and the demons. Because again, they know who Jesus is. They got his identity right. They've got it right. But they don't accept it as leadership over their life. They don't trust it. So I think that's an important thing for us to understand when it comes to this story. But here's the thing. I'm not saying that will always be easy. I'm not. But I'm saying if Jesus really is who he says he is, well, then we have a decision to make, don't we? Will we not only believe him, but then trust him, but then follow him, then let him lead? Anyways, so Jesus commands this legion of spirits to come out of the man. By the way, a legion of soldiers in the Roman army comprised thousands. So when Jesus says, "What is your name?" and he says legion, because there are many of us inside this man, guys, we're potentially talking thousands of demons inside this man. Again, this is a terrifying situation that they're walking into. So in other words, long story short, Jesus drove a lot of demons out of this man. And he drove them into a herd of pigs. By the way, this is also how we know this is pagan territory, because according to Jewish dietary law, pigs are off the table. So that's how we know we're in pagan territory. You don't find pigs in the Righteous Triangle, or up in Gamla, or really even in Tiberias. We're in pagan territory. He drives them into all these pigs. And like I said, there's only one cliff face on the eastern side of Galilee where this could have happened. You can go see it today. Like if you go to Galilee, you can drive right up to where this cliff face was. The Sea of Galilee has receded some over the years, so it's a little ways off from the shore now. But you can go see it today. And so here's the thing. What I want you to understand is that this is a real place where a real story happened. This is not fiction. Again, you can go there. You can see this. You can see the ruins of Susita, and they are unbelievable ruins. Over and over again, the Bible holds up. The Bible holds up. Archaeologists every day, there's 35,000 archaeological sites in Israel. Literally every single day, archaeologists are finding more and more evidence that what we have in the Bible, these are real places, these are real events, these are real people. This is an aside too, but there was an archaeologist named Nelson Gleck, who was an archaeologist in Israel for decades. And one of the things that I love that he said, not everything in the Bible has been proven, nothing has been disproven. Not a shred of historical or archaeological evidence has come to light that disproves anything that we have in the Bible. Now, not everything has been proven, nothing has been disproven. I think that's important to understand. So Jesus sends these demonic spirits into this herd of pigs. Now, here's what I want you to see. I've spent all of my time today setting up these last couple of minutes. All right? Longest introduction ever. That was my intro, okay? This part is relatively short, but here's what I want you to read in Mark 5. The herdsmen fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran about Jesus sending these demons into the pigs, okay? People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. He was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. Then those who had seen what had happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. They start begging Jesus to get out of here. So they all come out to see what has happened. They find Crazy Larry, who has been prowling around these tombs for years, has been howling like a wolf, and he's clothed. He's no longer crazy naked guy. He's clothed. He's in his right mind. What on earth is going on? And it terrifies them. Why? Because they know Crazy Larry. And the kind of power it took to drive those demons out of Crazy Larry, that power terrifies them. And they want Jesus out. They want him gone. Now, by the way, driving the demons into this herd of pigs also messes with them economically. 2,000 pigs. That's someone's livelihood. That's someone's livelihood. He just sent a bunch of demons into their flock. Flock? Herd? Piggery? I think it should be piggery. I like that way better. Into this herd of pigs. And so I kind of get why they wanted him gone, to be honest with you. Again, this is someone's herd of pigs. This is someone's livelihood. It's just that Jesus cared a lot more about this one man, about his salvation, about his deliverance, about his freedom, than he did about these pigs. We'll get to that later. We'll deal with that later. This guy matters. This guy's life, this guy's soul, this guy's spirit is so much more important than those 2,000 pigs. Doesn't even compare. That's what Jesus does, but they want him gone. So here's, continuing on in Mark 5, it says this. As Jesus was getting out of the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. But Jesus said, no. Hold on, let me stop there. Do you hear that? This guy goes, can I come with you? And what does Jesus say? No. No, you can't. Now, let me address maybe a question that gets raised here sometimes. Did Jesus not want this guy to follow him? Of course not. Jesus just healed him. He's more than welcome to become a disciple of Jesus, to become a follower of Jesus. But I love what Jesus says to him. He says, no, go to your home. Go home to your family. And then tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he's been to you. So the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed at what he told them. So this man desperately wants to go with Jesus. Remember, he lives in pagan territory. He doesn't want to go home. He knows Jesus now. He's just been healed by Jesus. And his townspeople want Jesus to leave. They want him gone. So this guy rightly and understandably says, can I come with you? Please don't send me back there. Can I go with you? But Jesus says, no, I have a different role for you. Can you follow me? Yes. Can you trust me? Yes. But you're not going to come with me right now. I have a different role for you. And that role is to go home and to tell everyone what God has done in your life. That's your job. In other words, hey, Crazy Larry, who's no longer crazy, go tell your story. Go tell your story. And the text tells us that that's exactly what he did. It says that he went into the 10 towns. So I mentioned the word Decapolis earlier. I told you it's 10 Greco-Roman cities. Guys, this isn't like, driving from, well, first of all, there's no driving. But this isn't driving, Kirkwood to Webster. He's going all over the region. He's walking. This would have taken him weeks, months to go to all 10 towns and tell the whole Decapolis what Jesus had done. Just for a point of reference, the nearest Decapolis city that I'm aware of in Israel, it's like an hour and a half bus ride. That's a bus ride. That's not walking, as Crazy Larry did. But it says that he went into all 10 towns and he told the people all that Jesus had done for him. Here's what I love, though. The next time that Jesus comes to the other side, just 2 chapters later, he's met by a crowd. He's met by a crowd. He brings his disciples back to the other side. And this time it says that a crowd came out to meet him. They were bringing their sick. They were bringing the deaf. They were bringing the lame to be healed by Jesus. I wonder if it's because Crazy Larry told his story of how God had been merciful to him. And here's the point. They saw the change in him. They saw the change in him. They saw the difference. And then they heard about what Jesus had done, and they want to meet the guy who changed Crazy Larry. Right? Like, wait, you're the same guy who was prowling around the tombs? You're the same guy who was howling like a wolf? You're clothed? You're wearing pants? Who did this to you? We got to meet that guy. And so a crowd comes out to meet him. Here's the point. You have a story to tell. You have a story to tell. It might not be as dramatic. as Crazy Larry's, odds are you haven't been healed from a legion of demons. If you have, I would love to talk to you. I would love to. I'm not even joking. I would love to hear your story. But you've been healed of something. You've been set free from something. You have a story to tell. And I think sometimes, especially for someone like me, for example, I grew up in a Christian home. I became a Christian when I was 13. And I think that if you kind of grew up with my story, it's really easy to dismiss your story. Say, well, mine's just not that interesting. It's not that dramatic. I wasn't possessed by a legion of demons, right? But no matter how dramatic your story seems to be or seems not to be, you have a story to tell if you're a follower of Jesus, of what Jesus has done in your life. So my question for you is, are you telling your story? Because I think oftentimes we buy into this lie that our faith is a private matter. That our faith is a private matter. It's not. No biblical basis for faith being private. It is decidedly public. Personal, yes. Private, no. It's not a private matter. You have a story to tell and you're meant to go tell it. So if you follow Jesus, are you telling your story? Who are you telling that story to? Who are you sharing it with? And if you're not a follower of Jesus, you still have a story. And I hope it's one that gets to Jesus. I hope it's one where you eventually get to say, let me tell you how I've been healed. Let me tell you the things that Jesus has set me free from. Let me tell you about his deliverance. Let me tell you about his goodness. Yeah, that person that I used to be, let me introduce you to the guy who changed it. I hope that becomes your story, if it's not already. And by the way, that change is really simple to accept. It's really simple. It's simply acknowledging that you need saving in the first place, that you need healing in the first place, that you need deliverance in the first place, and letting Jesus be the one to do it, trusting him to do it. So, again, these last few weeks, we've talked about 3 most important things. The most important question that you will ever answer: who do you say that Jesus is? Second follows the first, the most important gift that you will ever receive or ever give, and that is forgiveness. Because you can get the answer to the first question right and be no better off than the demons. That's why you need the gift. And then, having received that gift, this is the most important story you'll ever tell of what God has done in your life.